the majority of people do like to socialize, because even people that say that they're antisocial, they have friends, they have family, they're going to the movies, they're going out for dinner, they're going out and doing things. So they do like to socialize, but they like to do it their way. And so I think from the socially anxious professional perspective, we need to do some inner work and figure out, where do we feel most comfortable? Who do we talk to that we feel drained? And who do we talk to that we feel recharged? And really examine those for ourselves. And I think from a management perspective, we also need to be asking those questions to our employees.
Welcome to Work Unscripted. I'm your host, Marlo Lyons. I'm here to toss aside the corporate scripts for unfiltered truths. We are tackling real work challenges with no sugarcoating, providing you with the strategies to thrive and find fulfillment in your career. It's time to turn the page. It's time to be unscripted. Networking is a topic that often makes us squirm. I know it does for me, just thinking about it. But sometimes it's more than just discomfort. Sometimes the very thought fills you with nerves. Is there a way to navigate professional spaces when social anxiety clouds your vision? Today, I am thrilled to welcome Michaela Alexis, author of No Fear Networking, a guide to building relationships for the socially anxious. Michaela has transformed her own battles with social anxiety into a superpower for connecting authentically. She's here to share how you can do the same, even if stepping out of your comfort zone feels like stepping off a cliff. If you're ready to change how you view and tackle networking, this episode is a must listen. Let's get unscripted. Michaela, welcome.
I'm so excited. I know we were just talking about this earlier, but you're the first person that's read my book, and you're the first person I'm talking to about this topic that's super near and dear to me. So I'm really excited.
Oh, awesome. Because I'm super excited to meet you. I have been following you for a while. Your posts on LinkedIn, super authentic, and you're always trying to push the boundaries of fear and anxiety and let people know like it's okay. So I'm super excited. And congratulations on the new book. The new book is out, right?
Yes. It's available for pre-order. It comes out February 11th in bookstores, online, all the places. And I am just about to launch my 30-day No Fear Networking Challenge. That's what I was recording before this, where for 30 days, I'm going to go out and do things that just scare me to death as somebody with social anxiety. And I am crazy enough to put a camera on me and share the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Oh my God, that's awesome. I can't wait to see the post. It's going to be great. All right. So congrats on the new book, No Fear Networking, a guide to building relationships for the socially anxious. And you just said you are socially anxious. So I would say, honestly, that this book is going to appeal to everyone, because I would wager to say that most people would believe that networking is just a dirty word. I'm sorry. Like, people hate the word networking. They hate the act of networking. So for people who are socially anxious, including you, it's more than that, though, isn't it? Like, it's paralyzing in some way.
It is. It is. One thing to keep in mind, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what social anxiety actually is. There's social anxiety disorder, which is like you're mentioning, this paralyzing fear where you cannot leave your couch. You don't want to be around people. That's kind of like more like agoraphobia, which we'll probably get into. That's something that I struggle with. But social anxiety is actually a biological trait that 90 to 99% of us have. We have this ingrained in us because back in the day, if you said or did the wrong thing, you'd be kicked out of the tribe and you'd be fed to the lions or whatever. So it's something that has existed in humans since the beginning of time. It varies from person to person. Some people have fears of being on stage. I don't. Some people have fears of being in networking events. So it kind of varies from person to person. But the only people that don't have social anxiety are actually sociopaths, because they don't have the ability to care about what other people think of them. So I just thought that was like important to note, because I think sometimes, just like networking, we'll get into that, anxiety, the word anxiety has this negative connotation of like this like weakness or like this frail, fragile being. And really and truly, anxiety is a tool. And that's why the book is not about how to get over social anxiety. It's about how to manage, how to work with it, how it can benefit you. And networking, not fearlessly, but doing it in spite of the fear.
Oh my gosh, we have so much to unpack just in that one statement. Okay, so let's back up. So you said you had agoraphobia and you still have it, right? Like it doesn't go away. So, and you wrote this book from the perspective of having this social anxiety and this agoraphobia.
Mm-hmm. So agoraphobia is essentially a fear of public spaces, crowds. It got to the point for me, it kind of was triggered by, and I mentioned this in the book, of this panic attack that I had in university. And then it became this fear of having another panic attack in public. So my brain started to associate public and crowds as being a place that's unsafe. And it got to the point where for a year and a half, I couldn't leave my house, couldn't go to restaurants, couldn't go to movie theaters, any places where people were. I just physically could not go there.
How could you work? I mean, when you get to work, how do you do that?
So luckily this was in my 20s, which is actually, it's quite common for women in their 20s. I don't know why there's that connection there, but it was while I was in university. And so I was lucky in that most of my classes at that time were available on TV. They were recorded. And so I was able to kind of get by doing that by watching them from the comfort of my couch. But it did get to a point where I had to go and take an exam in person. And that was the point where I was sitting, I was standing on the train, and normally I would have to get off the train because I would get so worked up. And I kind of looked around and I was like, what am I choosing here? Like, either I don't live at all, or I can live imperfectly. And look, so what? If I have a panic attack, so what? Is that worse than not being able to leave my house? And so for me, and I know this kind of sounds like, very woo-woo, but it became a choice that I had to make between living imperfectly or living in fear. And so that's something that I live by even now. I'm certainly not the perfect, polished person, but I'm happy and I'm joyful and I'm doing things that I love. I'm able to go and speak on stages in front of thousands of people and travel by myself. So I think
that is a misconception. People might think like, oh, she doesn't have social anxiety. She can go speak in front of thousands of people.
Yeah.
Or the manager in the office might think, oh, well, this person's fine. They show up every day. They do a great job, but it's kind of hidden, right?
Yeah, a lot. I think a lot of us are really, really good at masking it rather than managing it, right? So it's kind of just pretending that it's not there rather than kind of addressing, okay, I have this thing. How can I make myself more comfortable? How can I excel despite having this thing? It is really hard to spot, and a lot of people, I think that's why I was offered the book deal to begin with, because they're like, how did you go from having agoraphobia to being a public speaker and traveling internationally? And I would say I did one interview with a speaker, a really fantastic speaker who is also autistic. And she said something that was really interesting to me because I couldn't figure it out myself, why it was okay for me to be on stage. And she said, when I'm on stage, I know my role. I know that I am up there and I am addressing people. I know my presentation. I know what their role is. But when I'm off stage and I'm right in front of a person, I don't really understand what my role is there. So it causes more anxiety for me than being on stage. And I'm like, oh my gosh, when you know the part that you're supposed to play, it really does reduce your anxiety. Or for some people, it might be the opposite, right? It could be, when there are no rules, it feels less, there's less pressure versus being on stage where there is kind of like a set box for you. And some people have more anxiety with that. So it varies from person to person. But I will say, I did a whole section on the amount of celebrities that have social anxiety and have talked about it. And it would be shocking for a lot of people, Gandhi had social anxiety, which is just like absolutely mind blowing. All the people that you've read about and you admire have probably dealt with social anxiety. And actually a lot of people that are on stage are able to excel because of that social anxiety, where they know that role that they play and are notorious for being really shy off stage.
Yeah, they're acting in some way. You're making me start to reflect on my life. And I'm thinking, like, I was a TV news reporter and I could talk to that black hole any day of the week, which is the camera, right? The little black hole in front of my photographer who I knew really well and I was really comfortable. But when I had to give like a wedding speech, I would shake. Isn't that interesting? Like, you're right. It's that crowd. It's the people. It's like, and it could be different for everybody. So when I think about it from a workplace perspective and you have a boss who doesn't understand you, they're going to say things like, speak up. I mean, I've had bosses say that to me. Hey, slow down, speak up, hurry up. And doesn't that, like, for me, it always made it worse. Like, I felt like I was being judged.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why, this was not a book that I actually pitched. I had actually pitched a different type of book and they came back and said, you need to write this book. And as I was writing it, I was like, oh my God, I need to write this book because it is so misunderstood. There is so much education to be had for people, whether they're at work, at home. It's going to change relationships. Even if you don't have a high degree of social anxiety, it's going to allow you to understand people that do much better. But at work, it shows up in different ways. Avoiding meetings is one of them. Not speaking up in meetings. Those are the obvious ones. Hiding in the washroom. I did this a lot. I didn't know this was social anxiety.
Hiding in the bathroom. Yeah.
This can also be tied to introversion, which is different. We'll get into that. Introversion is more about your energy levels. So if you are in an open concept office, which so many of them are these days, you might reach your limit. My social battery lasts about 2 hours. It's really low. I need to upgrade my battery a little bit, but it lasts for about 2 hours before I need to go into the washroom and just kind of take a few minutes to recharge. So that's another one. Feeling paralyzed at the thought of networking events or client presentation. There's so many ways that it comes across. And I would say that one thing that I have always struggled with in my own career, and that really bothers me kind of looking from the outside in, is this idea of forced socialization, where again, you have these open concept offices where people that don't fit that mold are kind of being forced into the box. Yeah. But then also it's like there's a lunchroom. So after you've spent hours working beside somebody, now you're expected to socialize in the lunch break room. And if you don't do it, then you're considered antisocial. And I think that we really need to change how we perceive these things. I think that's why there's so much pushback too with people that were allowed to work remotely during the pandemic and are now kind of being forced back to work. As a manager, I would be looking at, does this person work better when they are by themselves? Like, what is the reasoning beside? Most people will say convenience and all these things. It took me a long time too to figure out that this was all social anxiety, because it manifests as I don't like other people, or I don't like small talk. I hear that one a lot. I don't like small talk. But these are all things that we need to kind of like be looking out for and changing what socialization may look like. And I think for managers, asking people, how do you like to social? I don't think I've ever been asked that, what would be your idea of a comfortable team building exercise, right? For some people, they may say none, but nobody ever asked that. How do you like to socialize? Nobody asked that.
Are you okay with socializing, right?
I think the majority of people do like to socialize, because even people that say that they're antisocial, they have friends, they have family, they're going to the movies, they're going out for dinner, they're going out and doing things. So they do like to socialize, but they like to do it their way. And so I think from the socially anxious professional perspective, we need to do some inner work and figure out where do we feel most comfortable? Who do we talk to that we feel drained, and who do we talk to that we feel recharged, and really examine those for ourselves. And I think from a management perspective, we also need to be asking those questions to our employees.
If I don't ask those questions, I think what happens with most managers, if you don't have a curiosity about this piece, not just the work piece, but this piece, then it could really hamper somebody's career advancement. Like, it can really stop them from being able to move forward, because there's all that judgment that's placed on the behavior, such as avoiding the meeting, right? Or hiding in the washroom, or, they sound lazy, or there's some judgment upon that. So how do I deal with that? If I'm a socially anxious person, like my career advancement and everything is upon me. And if I can't get rid of social anxiety, then what do I do in those moments?
I think that it takes a little bit of courage to, share again, that inner work that you've been doing of, hey, I don't want to do this on my lunch break, but I would really like to start a club around this, so showing that you are open to alternatives to this like team building where you're just in cubicles. So it's not really like the culture anyways, but finding creative ways to show that, yes, you still want to be involved, but you want to do it your way, I think is the best thing. I think honesty goes a long way. Some of my best relationships that I've had with managers have known about my anxiety. And I think that certainly helps. And I think that, for organizations that you talk to that don't care about these things, that's more of a culture issue with the organization. And I'm not sure that they'd be able to advance there anyways. And I think that it's important to remember too, that even if you're an employee at an organization, career advancement doesn't stop within the office that you work at. You could be going on LinkedIn, go and work at a coffee shop, go to a dog park, go to networking events. You are in charge of your own career advancement. And it might look like not being at the place that you are right now, but being at, maybe a better organization or a better suited organization. So I think that's important to note too, is that your future is not totally dependent on the four walls that you're sitting within. It can be so much bigger. And it certainly was for me. I mean, posting on LinkedIn kind of opened up doors that I never thought possible.
Well, and you said just go to a networking event, but I think we're talking about social anxiety. So a lot of people would say, well, that's really hard. Like, I don't want to go to a networking event. Like, that's the whole point, right? Because you're socially anxious. So you have these 5 steps in the book, which I think are really profound. And very simple, right? It's not brain surgery, but at the same time, I think the order of them makes total sense. So let's kind of walk through them. So first one, goal setting for networking. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, what do you want to accomplish? And I think that this really helps people with social anxiety, because I think if you have a framework, it really helps you figure out how you can do it. It also kind of makes it more fun rather than, kind of like Fear Factor style going into like a pool filled with snakes. You are setting a goal and you're then figuring out how to accomplish that goal. So you're more focused on the goal rather than on the fear.
So the goal is like, I'm going to meet 7 people with a red shirt, like that kind of thing.
Yeah,
or I'm going to have small talk with 4 people that I don't know in the room.
100%. And even with my 30-day challenge, a lot of it is not, I need to book these amount of calls, because that's a hard part too. Is like, even if you're in sales, you could be in sales and have social anxiety. That happens actually quite often. Don't make it that. Make it like you're mentioning. My goal is to remember the names, because we do that, right? If you have social anxiety and you're talking to somebody, what do we do? It's like, Marlo, you just told me my name and I just forgot your name 3 seconds later. And then we're too deep in the conversation and I can't ask you your name now because it's going to be too awkward. It's going to look like I don't care. This is how my brain works.
So my brain works the same way.
So just a little goal like that is going to help, because what that does is it's not just remembering the name. What the point is learning how to quiet the noise and tune into the person. Because once you tune into the other person rather than focusing inward, that's when the anxiety happens. So there are benefits to these goals. It's not just like this arbitrary, like remember 3 names, but kind of gamifying the whole process is going to make it just a little bit more fun. And what your goal is, there's no like be all end all. It's whatever makes sense for you. If you have agoraphobia and you cannot leave your house, it might be get up, go in your car and go through a drive-through. I've seen that on TikTok, people that have major social anxiety and they will have notes in their car. It breaks my heart, but they have notes in their car of how to order things. But you have to start somewhere. And that same person could be like me. They could be in years from now speaking on a stage, because that exposure is going to build this social muscle that we all have.
Okay, great. So it's step 1. Step 2, location. Tell me about location. Why does location matter?
Well, let's think about it for a second. What is the first thing? Maybe I'm just a weirdo. What's the first thing if your friend says to you, let's go get coffee on Wednesday? What's the first thing that you're thinking of?
Where are we going to be?
Right?
How many people will be there?
Parking. Parking is a big one for me because I will automatically in my head, if somebody says downtown, I'm like, well, I just can't do that, you know? So knowing the information in advance, I have many times, especially when I'm speaking, I go to the venue. And I will look at the venue. I will look at the stage. I will step on the stage. I mean, if you're not a speaker, that doesn't make any sense to you, but you can do that. If you have social anxiety, there are no rules. If I was going to meet you, Marlo, for coffee, and you said, I'm going to meet you at this great place on Main Street, drive to Main Street a week before you're going to meet up and park and go into the coffee shop. Because if that's going to make you feel more comfortable on the day of, then just do it. Don't worry about the perception or, oh my gosh, this makes me such a weirdo, because it's just going to make you more prepared. We prepare for everything else, but for some reason, we don't think that we need to prepare for socialization.
Right. No, that's true. That's a really good point. But when you get there and you're at the location, you should have a game day ritual as well. You should know what you're doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, this is so common with like athletes, especially. That's probably the biggest one. And for some reason, again, people think that they should be able to just walk into a room and just schmooze and get all these business cards. And for the majority of people, that is not the case. I have tried that before. It doesn't go well for me. So I have a whole routine where I'm like, okay, I want to have 4 hours before I go to speak or a major event. And I'm going to have a nice warm shower. Then I have a playlist. So I have a playlist where I start with like kind of like soft, gentle music, and then it builds up to like more rock and roll, more Beyonce, more like, you know, gym style video or music. So
energy, right?
Just building up that energy. And it can be different for each person. It could include meditation. It could include, you know, watching music videos to get you really pumped up. It could be doing a workout. You could go and do a workout. You see that all the time, right? You see people before they get on stage, they're doing push-ups and stuff like that. I'm not going to do a push-up before I go to an event. Absolutely not. But if you want to make that part of your routine, again, there are no rules around any of this stuff. So having a game day ritual is going to make it so much easier when you walk into that room.
So when you get in the room, and you mentioned this earlier, you have a 2-hour battery lifespan, but you have to know what your battery lifespan is. How do you know that yours is 2 hours? And how do I figure out what mine is?
I think that we all kind of know, right? It's like that moment, like where you could be sitting around with friends, family. I can be sitting with anybody, and there's a certain point in the conversation where I just shut down, right? And I just start like kind of like feeling a little bit drunk without alcohol. I'm just feeling a little bit lazy, like I need to take a nap. Part of that is because of, you know, I'm an introvert. And so I need to recharge on my own. But definitely knowing your battery and kind of just test it. You know, go out to with a friend on the weekend and grab coffee and just kind of think about your energy levels. And whenever that point comes where you start to feel like you need to take a nap, write it down on a piece of paper or put it in your phone, because that is probably true no matter who you're talking to. And so I like to kind of build my social interactions around knowing that I have 2 hours. So if I have 2 hours, then that means an hour is probably going to be for my presentation. And then I have an hour after where I can schmooze and talk to people before I need to go back to the hotel and take a nap. But it's going to be different for everybody. And knowing what it is makes such a big difference.
How does it make a difference? Like what does it do for you?
It allows me to not be in the middle of, so for me, I used to go to an event before I would speak. The problem with that is that I would be schmoozing and then I would get on stage in the middle of my presentation, I would need to take a nap. In the middle of a presentation, right? So it's kind of like Cinderella. We're all Cinderellas. It's like, when is that glass slipper going to fall off? So kind of knowing what that point is going to allow you to maximize that time. So even if you're at a conference, let's say, and you're going to do different sessions, knowing, okay, I can do one session that's an hour before I'm going to be able to go and network, and then I need to take a break. And then I'm going to do another session. So organizing your schedule so that you are at your best at the times that matter most is it's what's really game changing.
And you also need to know like what you're getting into each time. Like I have a big speech coming up in a couple months and I'm a little freaked out about it. Like it's going to be really important in front of a bunch of executives. And I'm trying to visualize what that would look like. But I don't know the room and I don't know the location. And I mean, I know it's in a different city, so I can't go look at it. Like,
right.
How should I be visualizing this? Like, because you say that's the fifth step is to visualize what you're getting into.
Yeah. I would say, even if you can't go there in person, go and see is it at a hotel or where is it at?
Yeah, it's across the country, literally, in another, like the whole other side of the country.
This is going to make me sound insane, but I have looked at floor plans before. If I'm going to go speak somewhere, I will look up at the hotel. I will look up the room. If you can Google it, I would definitely recommend looking it up. You could call the event coordinator, say, could I just do like a virtual walk around of the room? There are, they probably would love to be able to do that with you. So, finding creative ways to do that. And I think when it comes to visualization, it's not just about what the room is. I like to visualize how I'm going to feel after. Because it's kind of like working out. If you visualize, okay, this is me on a treadmill, I'm never going to be like, all right, I'm going to go to the gym. But if I can visualize what it's going to feel like when I'm dripping sweat and I feel like, so much better and those endorphins are riding high, that's going to motivate me. So thinking not necessarily about the event itself, but how amazing it's going to feel when it's over, when it's done, when you're stepping off stage and you've impressed all these people and these executives come up and, maybe some of the opportunities that might come afterwards. Those are the things that are important to visualize.
And so if I'm at a networking event, I'm visualizing like how I'm going to feel if I walk away with 3 business cards or if I potentially walk away with some new contacts. For
sure. Or having a good conversation. I think that, for some people, it's building their network. But for a lot of people, it's just they want to feel connected to other people. I think, I just did this video for this challenge and I was talking about how hard it is to make friends as an adult. It is, right? And so for so many of us, we're working 9 to 5, we're on this hamster wheel. And not only are we on this hamster wheel, we feel like we're the only ones that are doing this. It's very lonely, especially for, I'm a working mom. My husband is gone most of the time. And so my girlfriends are my lifeline. Really and truly, I don't know what I would do without them. So for some people listening, it may not be getting 3 business cards. It may not be career advancement. It could be as simple as I want to have girlfriends that once a month, these are my work friends and we go out for lunch together and we just talk, just being able to have. And then there's the other part of anxiety is this beast that tells you all the things that you can't do. And the only way to overcome some of that fear is to do what it says that you can't do, because then it kind of, all of a sudden it's like, boop, 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 and it just shuts it up. It shuts out that voice because you're like, now what, right? I did that thing that I thought I couldn't do. What else can I do? And so I want people listening to know that it's not just about walking into a networking event, room and career advancement. It's about proving to yourself that you can do things that are scary so that you can do other things that are scary, because life is filled with all of these events, right?
It's so true. And I think most of us, like we get in our head that, especially women, right? We have to be perfect. We have to show up, but yet we also need to be vulnerable and we need to be authentic and we have to bring all of this to the table. And I think we put too much pressure on ourselves, right? To be perfect. And I think the one thing that resonated with me the most about reading, all the things that you write online is that they are authentic, they are vulnerable, and they're just real. So if you just walk in and be real, if somebody doesn't like you or if it's not feeling good to you, that's okay. Because you're just being you.
Yeah. And you're not going to be for everybody. I certainly am not. But just having a few people in your orbit that understand you, that accept you, that see you, that appreciate you. I mean, so many of us go throughout our day without feeling seen, without feeling heard. Early on in my career, one of the loneliest things was going to work and looking around and being like, I wonder if I didn't show up tomorrow, if anybody would even notice. Right. And I think there's so many of us that are walking around feeling like that. in our 9 to 5, off the clock. And so that's why this work is really important, just kind of beyond the networking event. Because networking really, for me, and it has that dirty word. Actually, there's a really great study that I referenced in the book of how people feel physically unclean after talking about networking. And that's why I think it's important to differentiate between transactional networking, which is me going to a networking event and I'm giving you my business card and you're giving me your business card, and we're trying to figure out how we can get business for each other, versus spontaneous networking. And what was really interesting, I interviewed so many people for this book. When I asked them about spontaneous networking, which is going somewhere or doing something and meeting somebody by chance, kind of serendipitously, they lit up. Totally different reaction. They lit up when they would talk about, well, one time I was in line at, the TSA line at the airport, and I met this guy, and that's something that's important to remember, is that you don't necessarily have to go to a networking event. Just go to a coffee shop, go out, get out of your house, get out of your bubble. This is especially important for people that are working remotely, where it's very easy to not do that, and make space in your life for these serendipitous, spontaneous networking events to happen.
So when you talk about like those 5 steps, right, to kind of deal with the social anxiety, and we walked through them, right? Setting the goal and the location and the game day ritual and, the battery lifespan and visualize. You're talking about in life too. You're not just talking about going to the networking event or going to work. You're talking about like, set my goal for the year. That this year I'm going to go sit in a coffee shop for 3 days and I'm going to observe other people. You may not even talk to anybody, right? But observe others. Or maybe I'm going to, when I'm on the line at the grocery store, I'm going to talk to somebody in front of me. Like those could be real goals.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a thing called parallel play that is used by psychologists when it comes to children. So when kids are really little, they don't actually have the ability early on to play with each other, but they'll play beside each other. And they actually found that was just as rewarding for kids and beneficial for them as playing kind of with each other, just kind of being in the same orbit as another child. And I think this idea of parallel play is something that we need to bring back as adults, that it's okay. You can go to a coffee shop and just being next to somebody that's also working can be really beneficial for your mental health. And for, again, quieting that voice saying, you can't do this. You can't be out in public. And it's kind of like, going to a gym and maybe doing 15 minutes on a treadmill rather than going to a 1-hour Pilates class. It doesn't need to be all or nothing, right?
Yeah. So when I think about social anxiety in the workplace, should I be worried if I am that introvert? Like if I'm an introvert, maybe that's what's causing all of this. Or if I'm an extrovert, but I could do some things really well, but yet other things create that social anxiety. Like, how do I have that conversation with someone? Because then I feel like the manager might be like, oh, you're lying, or, oh, you're, but you were fine in that meeting. How come you can't do this thing?
Yeah, because this is so important. Let's talk about what an introvert is and an extrovert and an ambivert. Okay. So an introvert is somebody that can be in public. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're socially anxious, although it's highly correlated, but they need time on their own to recharge that social battery. Extroverts actually recharge by being around people. So those are those people, I know a few people in my life where it's like, I gotta get out of the house. I need to go do things, right? They need to be around other people because that's how they recharge their battery. Ambiverts they go back and forth, right? So some days they might need to get out and be around other people. And then some days it's the opposite where it's like, no, I need this time for myself to recharge on my own. So people get introverts and social anxiety confused a lot of the time, but you can actually be an introvert or an extrovert or an ambivert and have social anxiety. So if you are an extrovert, gosh, I can't even imagine what kind of hell that would be. But you recharge your battery. You need to be around other people, but you're scared of them. I can't imagine what that's a whole other challenge that you might have, right? Whereas for introverts, again, it's about knowing what your social battery looks like and kind of working around that. So there is that difference there. But in terms of like the workplace, I think number one, teaching people the difference between social anxiety and introversion and extroversion is super, super important because like you're saying, that person could be an ambivert. I think I've always thought that I was an introvert, and then reading through them, I'm like, I might be an ambivert. Because I do know that I have days, especially when I was on mat leave, I really struggled with this. I would have days where I was like, I need to leave. I can't be in the house any longer. Where other days I was just so happy. Oh gosh, yes. And then there were other days where it was really nice and cozy to be in that little bubble. So I think kind of teaching people the difference between different introversion, extroversion kind of styles is really important because again, you could be great in that meeting, but that could be an ambivert that the next meeting, they're not into it. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, and I think we all need to understand our own comfortability too, right?
Right.
Like we have to understand what we're comfortable with because we can't explain it to our manager what we're comfortable with and what we're not comfortable with unless we know.
Yeah. And I think that there needs to be some ownership of some of this too. I think that in society, we've kind of gotten in this mode of here's my diagnosis or here's the things that I have. So everybody needs to accommodate it. But I think before we ask for accommodation, we need to take accountability and we need to figure out how we can exist in the world playing with the cards that we've been dealt. So if you are struggling with social anxiety, I actually have like a little like journal in the book where I ask things like, when you go to an event, how did you feel afterwards? How many people were there? So asking all these questions for yourself. I know for myself, I like small groups. So I really thrive in like groups of like 4 or 5, like once we start getting into like 8 or 9, I feel like it's a little bit overwhelming. I noticed that I really like sitting down. And this is something that I learned this year. I don't know what it is, but the idea of standing at those like high top tables in like uncomfortable shoes, where you're wearing probably an itchy shirt or you're thinking about all of these other things that are going on. I have always found that being in a coffee shop, sitting down with somebody else staring at me, feels so much more comfortable because it feels more grounded. That's a little woo-woo, but I feel closer to the earth. I would love to sit on the ground. Let's all just sit down on the ground and have a conversation.
Pillows down.
Yeah, but I feel like it just sitting allows, at least for me, to feel like I could have a more intimate conversation than I would be if I'm like at these high top, unnatural tables. But other people might be the opposite. Sitting down could be really uncomfortable and they might need to like get up and move. And that's why there's so many events that are available now where you could join walking groups, right? Where some people like to talk. My husband drives me crazy because anytime he's on the phone, he's walking and talking. I'm like, sit down and have the conversation. But there are people everywhere in the world that need to walk while they're talking. And so it's not one size fits all. It is different from person to person, and knowing what it looks like for you is going to make it a lot easier to ask for what you need.
And if I am a leader and I think I have like somebody in my group, I'm listening to this and oh my God, the light bulbs are going off. And I have somebody in my group or somebody that I lead who may have social anxiety and maybe they don't know it. Or maybe I've been, saying things to them that's making them worse. Like, what can I do without calling them out? Because maybe they don't have it, right?
Yeah, I love this question. I think we shouldn't be going around diagnosing people and saying you have this and you have that. But when I was interviewing people, I wanted to interview people not just that were like me, but people that were the opposite of me, master networkers, people that were super confident that maybe had like 0.001% social anxiety, really and truly. And what I noticed from the people that were like these like super connectors, like very confident networkers, is that they led with vulnerability. So what that might look like is if you're in a meeting, say, I know this has been a really challenging week. Like I've really struggled too. Like this is really hard. Or just, even if you're talking about social anxiety, maybe you're a leader that also has struggled with those things. Oh, I know you don't want to go to this networking event. I really struggle with these networking events. Let's brainstorm some different events that might be more comfortable for you. That is what's called in the book. There's research that's been done by a psychologist named Dr. Carol Robin. and she's amazing. She's been so helpful with this book, but she has this rule called the 15% rule. And this is something that naturally I think that we do and we don't notice that we do. But basically what she says is that in order to get into deeper conversation with each other, we need to each go 15% beyond our comfort zone. So that's pretty easy for me. I don't even know what my 15% looks like now. But let's say that I'm meeting you for the very first time. I might get on a call, and I do this all the time with my clients, and they don't even notice that I'm doing it. Oh, happy Monday. My dog just chewed up my husband's shoe, and I had to do this or something like that. Or, just dropped off my daughter at daycare. Because it's not something that I would normally say to somebody just like walking up to them on the street. So it's a little bit outside my comfort zone. But what that does is it now allows my client to say, oh my gosh, dogs are the worst when it comes to, especially in this weather, and like they're not able to get out for walks. And now they can talk about their dog. So they're going 15% off beyond their comfort level. And we keep doing this dance, until we get into this deeper conversation mode. And so this is something that we need to bear in mind in work, in life, in general. But people in general need to know that you understand and that you see them before they're going to open up about their own struggles. I don't think anybody is willing to be like, but that's why I think it's actually a great opener. In the book, I have all sorts of icebreakers that you can use, but really and truly, one of my favorite icebreakers is if you have social anxiety, being like, oh my gosh, events like this make me so nervous, but I showed up. Hi, my name is Michaela. Because now that allows, again, maybe that person might look at you like you have two heads. That's not your person. But maybe you just unlocked a level, because one thing that is important to note with people with social anxiety is that they have been shown to have higher levels of empathy. So what makes us really hard when it comes to like small talk, people with social anxiety do really well with deeper conversation because of that empathy. So I think that if we're looking at hacks in conversation, getting beyond the small talk, if you have social anxiety, is the ultimate way that you can network. Right. So just finding those ways that you can break that ice, that you can give 15% so that you can go beyond, for me at least, has been huge.
And that 15%, like you said, could be so natural. It could be what just happened when you couldn't find a place to park. You have trouble finding parking, or
tiny.
Could be so easy.
I don't recommend, being like, my dog has an IUI, and you don't need to do that. You don't need to go there, right? It's not this huge leap. I mean, unless you want to, you're taking a big chance, right? It's probably a bigger risk that way. But it's just 15% beyond what you would like walk up to somebody on the street and say. So I think that's a good practice for most people, right? I think that like, if you are not willing to go to the networking event yet, you don't want to go to the coffee shop, just practice this 15% for like a week and see what happens. See what kind of conversations unfold.
And I think the one thing that I loved about this book is that, we all think of networking as the big event or the big thing or the team event at work or whatever it is. But you talk about like, hey, go to the low, medium or high intensity situation, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's so great because it can be the coffee shop, like it can be the grocery store. These are all networking opportunities, but that doesn't mean to overwhelm you or stress you any further, right? That going to the grocery store is now not going to be relaxing for you.
Yeah. Or like Zoom calls, right? Like this is a networking event. Right? We're networking right now. We're sharing stories. We're sharing conversations. And that's really what networking is. It's just, building your community. That's all it is. So kind of getting out of that mindset that it needs to be done one way. If it's you send a connection request to somebody on LinkedIn that you admire, do that today. Whatever that small baby step looks like for you, just do that. Because I can tell you that for me, it really and truly was a baby step of getting off my porch right? And then from the porch, I got to the train. And then from the train, I got to the school. It was not, okay, I went from this to speaking on a stage. It took these little choices that I would make every single day to get to this point. And it's still a struggle for me. There are still situations where I feel really burnt out or I'm super overwhelmed. But at least now I have the tools to be able to manage it the best that I can. And I'm saying no to the things that I know that I'm not going to be good at. I'm saying yes to the things that I know that I can thrive in, those environments that I can thrive in. And I'm spending that energy there rather than beating myself up because what's wrong with me that I can't just do this thing.
And I think that's a great place to stop because you said take that first step. So that's the challenge to the audience is take that first step. I would say the first step is to buy the book. The book is excellent.
The book is so fun.
It was excellent. It was excellent. And it's called No Fear Networking, a guide to building relationships for the socially anxious. And notice it says building relationships, which takes the pressure off, right? And if people want to connect with you, like if they want to do your 30-day challenge that you're talking about, doing something totally outside your comfort zone for 30 days, or they want to follow you, like where do they find you?
Yeah, so I have an event on LinkedIn where I'm sharing the different tasks that I'm doing every single day. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can practice on me. We'll practice together. Let's jump on a Zoom call. Let's have a virtual coffee. I'll be your socially anxious networking buddy. So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. I spend more time talking about kind of mom life on there, but definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. And buy the book.
Awesome. And that's, yes, and buy the book. And that's Michaela Alexis. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been so enlightening. And I'm reflecting on my own life right now. And I'm realizing what I need to do to prepare as I move forward as well. And I hope it's really helped the audience as well. I hope it's helped people that are in the workplace who are struggling with this, come back to work or struggling with their boss or struggling in some way. So thank you so much. Woo! What a relevant conversation. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Work Unscripted. If this resonated with you, don't miss our upcoming episodes where we'll dive even deeper with actionable strategies to help you navigate your professional world unscripted. Work Unscripted is produced and edited in partnership with the team at Palm Tree Podco and 21 Digby. The content for this week's episode was created by me, Marlo Lyons.